So is Nigeria facing a reckoning against its decades of corruption, political recklessness, and economic mismanagement, particularly in the last 8 years of the Buhari-led APC government, the malign echoes of which are being felt today? Well, if you ask members of President Tinubu's government, they'll say that a major house cleaning is underway to brush away the cobwebs that have clogged any chance of economic and social progress, and that with a new central bank governor, Olayemi Cardoso, now in place, as well as an economic management team, the process of rescuing the battered naira, resetting Nigeria's monetary policy, and re-nosing its economy would now get underway. But with mass protests over rising living costs imminent and the devastating impact of insecurity still being felt in many parts of the country, not to mention a still uncertain political direction, with no one quite sure of what the judiciary will do, how can a new economic team stabilize a ship that's tilting so dangerously and listing so badly? Now let's further enrich our perspectives and explore some of the issues covered on the program today with our guest contributor. And for that immersive experience, we have the current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Baze University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. And I couldn't have wished for a better analyst. Great to see you, Prof. Let's start with the guest who's just left, Alhaji Shehu Gabam, who is the national chairman of the Social Democratic Party. He started off by making allegations of political violence. I mean, we see political violence all the time, but it's always, when you point a finger at someone, it's always got to be supported with evidence and all the rest of it. Evidence which he said that they've given to the police and to the president. What are your thoughts on what he was saying?
Well, he didn't really say anything new. It's typical of politicians, to raise alarm, rightly or wrongly, in the build-up to every electioneering contest. And of course, it depends on who you are talking to, which of the divide you are talking to. If you talk to another person, maybe of the APC, of the PDP, they're likely to sound differently. So it's just the normal pattern, normal trajectory of a political process.
But I was wondering why they, sorry to interrupt you, apologies, but I was wondering why they seem to think that they were, I mean, the SDP has never really been seen as a top-tier party, and you have to wonder why they seem to think that they're being targeted.
Yeah, I think it's a different thing really probably happening in Kogi State, where there's this assumption, I think, that the Social Democratic Party candidate has a good chance. Yeah, has a very good chance. And don't forget that at the time, it was in this controversy with the governor, on the road, where there was supposed to be some kind of misunderstanding, some kind of bust-up between the security agencies of both parties. And of course, the governor came out and said he should not be threatened because he's a lion, So there's this perception, rightly or wrongly again, in the state, that sometimes one party, it's more influential than the other, so you need to really continue to hit at the most influential party if you have to make wings. Yeah, if you have to make any mark at all, So as it is now, the APC is being seen as the ruling party in Kogi State and as the party to beat, supposedly. So if they have to make any mileage, really, they have to continue to raise their voices, be concerned about threats to the electioneering process and highlight the need for them to have a free, fair, credible election, where transparency, credibility will be guaranteed. So I think it's a legitimate cry, but I'm not surprised. It's not something new. It speaks largely again, to subsisting discourse around the clientelistic politics that will run, first past the post, whether or not we should continue with it. And you see the characteristic, the traits coming even before and after the election. Before the election, you see parties sounding very vociferous, sounding menacing, making different allegations. And after the election, of course, you also see parties still being concerned about whether they lose or win, how to consolidate their victory. Or you see some other parties who are supposedly losers, trying to claim or to reclaim victory, as the case could be. The fight is often very frenetic. And that's why there's this discourse of whether we should continue with this kind of politics, where it is the winner takes all, or we should have some level of proportional representation, not necessarily clientelistic, where the powerful has direct relationship, with the electorates, and of course the one that has the biggest war chests is often able to muster a greater level of influence to gather the votes, ahead of the ones those that are supposedly weaker. So I think it might be a stage that something we'll continue to deal with, obviously, but maybe in the future, the character of the process can be different, from what we are presently witnessing.
Well, there are a couple of things I want to get to, because I've just been told that we have to finish a little bit earlier than usual, because there's a big sort of promo we've got to run at the end.
All right.
But one of the things I wanted to have you address as well is he talked really volubly about his sense of the direction of Nigerian politics, and I felt, he was very emotive, but also coming from someone who clearly had a lot of understanding and knowledge of Nigerian politics.
Yeah, the direction is worrisome, Charles. It's not just for the politicians, even for those of us who probably are not necessarily partisan for now. Everybody, you have to have some concern. If you look at the economy, for instance, everything rests on the economy. The economy is weak. If you look at what we recently used to measure it, the condition of the naira, it's frightening and very, very disturbing. And there are no factors, no elements on the ground to assure us that we're going to move away from this level in the near future, because we're not producing anything. So how will the dollars come in? And there's increased pressure on the naira. How? People who make money from this system, and most of the time when the monies are allegedly or suspectedly stolen, those monies are again hedged in dollars. So there's continuous pressure on the naira in a situation where stolen funds are not being deployed or redeployed or pumped back into the economy to play any role as the case could be. So there's continuous pressure on the naira, and beyond the economic sector, it's also the political sphere, where we keep seeing continuous disagreement amongst our politicians, often very difficult for correct or incorrect reason for them to accept defeat, or even for those who are victorious to be magnanimous in victory. And do not forget again, the increase, I like the word by Femi Falana or SAN, that the tribunalization of the election process, in the post-election stage, we often go to the courts, and it continues ad infinitum. And what we're even beginning to see now is that even after the tribunal judgment or after the court verdict, we now have a new space, to ventilate, and the ventilation is also increasingly becoming damaging to all our institutions, which is the space of the social media. Yes, it is expressive, it is good to ventilate, but the ventilation sometimes can be very, very depressing if you see how damaging, the kind of information that is paraded in that sector can be very damaging and disturbing for people who want a sane and ordered climb, as the case could be. Right. So it's a whole lot of factors that we're having to deal with. Right. But of course, we cannot deny the place of the leader in all the circumstances. If we have leaders at different sectors, not necessarily presidential leadership, at different sectors who can up the ante, lead by example, not just by parroting good things, godly things, but show examples. If the followers see examples, I'm sure they will be in tow.
Right. We've got less than 2 minutes or so. I really quite enjoyed listening to you. And then you sit here almost night after night as an objective assessor of what is happening in this country. I wonder what it is about Nigeria that you find the hardest to cope with?
Yeah, one thing is that I think the average Nigerian, Charles, some seem to understand what the problem is. We all know what the problem is, you know, and even the leaders, they also know what the problem is, you know, but we are finding it difficult to approach the solution, to take on the solution. Look at the question of the absence of transparency, for instance, the lack of credibility in the contracting system, in the public expenditure process. You know, there are laws, there are regulations guiding these things, you know, but we seem to enjoy circumventing it and thinking that it is not for me. It is not for me to begin the process of reform.
Well, to be honest with you, it's the absence of the rule of law. In any country, if there is the absence of the rule, because I mean, the president can't do everything.
It's not the president.
There's the absence of the rule of law.
Yeah, I think
people will take advantage of the system.
Yeah,
period. It doesn't matter whether it's the U.S. or Nigeria.
Absolutely. No, we are on the same page. The laws are there, but we circumvent it with impunity, and there's no deterrence. There are no sanctions. Even when the sanctions are there, people still ride over it. You know, but at the same time, we're saying that this circle can be broken if we have some kind of determined
political will.
Political will. Some craziness being displayed somewhere, craziness in parentheses, and somebody come in and say, look, this chain has to be broken. And how will it come? That person will not mind whose ox is God. Make example out of one or two people.
Absolutely.
And of course, you know, lead by example, that word again. And of course, strengthen the institutions that will implement some of these many laws that we are happy to have, but of course, that we are not implementing, sadly.
I did say that this was going to be an immersive experience, and certainly for me it has been. Prof, thank you very much indeed. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is a current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Baze University in Abuja. Thank you.
My pleasure.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye and thank you for watching.